We're live. I think we're live. Yes, we are live. It says we're live. Welcome back to the Grease Monkey Videos channel. You'll want to stick around to the end because this is probably the kind of debate you've never seen before. And if you have seen one like this, it's probably been a long time. So stick with me. I've whittled this down. This is an hour and a half debate that I whittled it down to under 40 minutes, but I want you to take a look at it. Before we go over this, though, I wanted to show you something because Marcy T says here, please hit the like button on the way in because you know who loves to shadow ban. Much love. Here's an example of shadow banning. Now, anytime I upload a video here on Grease Monkey Videos, I get 19, the algorithm gives me 19 minutes. And after that 19 minutes, somebody wrote a code and slapped it on not just my channels, but a bunch of channels. And after the 19th minute, it valves it off like crazy. This mark right here is like 176 views per minute. This is after you upload it right here. It goes up, and usually it'll stay like this for probably 10 to 12 hours, but mine is only 19 minutes. After this right here, they valve it back down to less views than I get at the 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning hour, which is ridiculous. So I sent a tweet out to YouTube at Team YouTube today. I said, hey, take a look at this. You need to remove this algorithm because that's what it is, guys. When you have a like to dislike ratio of over 99% on almost every video a channel uploads, and you can tell that they froze my subscriber count, they've froze my view count. They've capped me at about 8 to 10,000 views per video. It's really ridiculous. It's really dishonest. So yeah, hitting the like button and hitting the share and getting this out to as many people as possible is what helps to overcome the algorithms. And maybe I'll show you some more back end stuff a little bit later, but I wanted to focus on this debate right here. This is the U.S. House of Representatives, Arkansas District 2 debate with the Democrat Quintessa Hathaway, Republican French Hill, and Libertarian Michael White. I've never heard of Libertarian Michael White. And one of the things you want to do when you show up on a debate stage is you want to at least look like you know what the issues are, what you're talking about, and what platform or springboard you operate from. And it's got to come from the heart, because I've seen a lot of libertarians talking, but it's like it's coming from a page and it's almost like it's canned. But this guy seems to know what he's talking about. And again, I've whittled an hour and a half down to about 40 minutes. Stick with me because this is the kind of stuff that they won't show you on Fake Stream CIA, Infiltrated Operation Mockingbird, MK Ultra Media. This comes from Arkansas PBS. We're going to go ahead and I've split this up on my editing software, and I've pretty much cut out. If you want to watch the entire debate uninterrupted, by the way, I will leave it in the pinned comment and the description when this video is over. But I pretty much edited out almost everything. Almost everything that Hathaway says, because it almost looks like she majored at some liberal arts college in the the fine art of word salad. So, and I'm going to show you an example of that, and you can tell me if you want to listen to more of her. But I pretty much had enough of what she had to say. So let's start with this debate. Here's the first question on the debate stage in the U.S. Congressional Debate District 2 in the state of Arkansas. Check this out.
Dr. Hathaway, on October 3rd, the national debt reached $31 trillion. Since then, it's already increased another $100 billion. And for perspective, $31 trillion is $94,000 for every American man, woman, and child. What should be done?
First, I'd like to thank Arkansas PBS for this opportunity to be able to debate against my colleagues, because I do consider them to be my colleagues, for we are all working toward the exact same mission to love and live Central Arkansas.
No, it's not. That's not true. When you're part of a political party, especially the Democrat or Republican, you're not working in favor of any people anywhere. I don't care if it's the people of Arkansas or the people of America. When you're part of the two-party system, you're part of corporate America. You're part of that Title 28, Section 3002, 15A, United States means federal corporation. So basically, you're running and campaigning to be a corporate employee. So that is absolutely not true, and it's demonstrably not true.
Now, when it comes to addressing the national debt, it is a disaster. It is something in which ought to be addressed wholeheartedly by the chambers of Congress, There are some things in which we can do to address the national debt, such as, one, grapple with this issue of inflation. There are also some things that caused us to be in this situation. One, it goes back to when we were in a surplus. We had a surplus under President Bill Clinton. Then we had two wars, the Iraqi and Afghanistan war. We've also had unfunded mandates, which caused us to have this issue, as well as other presidents have also contributed to the national debt.
Stay tuned, because I only put a couple of clips of her in there, and this is why. Put a 1 in the room if you think I made the right decision by editing her out of this.
Doctor, I have to call time there. Mr. Hill, you have 1 minute, sir. Thank you, Steve. I, too, want to thank AET.
The people in the front, every time she blinks, the people in the front row are like, all right, back to the regularly scheduled program.
And PBS for hosting the debate. Great to be with my colleagues on the stage today. Look, this is the fundamental issue that I think challenges the future of our country, is our debt. And our debt has almost doubled in the time I've been in Congress, and most of that growth was as a result of the pandemic and President Biden's spending following the pandemic. What do we need to do? Go back to pre-pandemic spending levels and debates and prioritize it. And secondly, get bipartisan support for reforming the 2/3 of the budget that drives that debt.
You know, anytime I hear somebody say bipartisan support, I'm like, okay, not just one party's going to bend us over and screw us. It's going to be two parties. It's going to be like a gang. You know what?
Which are our mandatory spending programs, which we can only reform through a bipartisan project. And we need leadership from the president. We didn't get that leadership.
You know what it reminds me of every time she blinks? Remember Snuffleupagus? On Sesame Street, he had those big. Okay, sorry guys, I digress.
From President Trump, and we've not gotten that leadership from President Biden. So we need that effort in order to do it. Finally, we need a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, and I got that on the House floor in 2018 for a vote.
Thank you, sir. Mr. White, 1 minute.
Mr. White's gonna tear it up. He's going to play janitor, and he's going to grab the Republican, and he's going to grab the Democrat, and he's going to dip him in the bucket, and he's going to wipe the floor with him. Go, Mr. White.
Well, thank you. That's a great question. $31 trillion in debt is continually blamed on each party. We have Republicans and Democrats, each blaming the others for it. The truth is it takes bipartisan support to get $31 trillion in debt. This is not a new thing. We've been working on this for a long, long time, and we continue to get the same talking points from both the right and the left about how to solve it. Fiscal responsibility, sound money, and sound monetary policy are the diet and exercise of government. If we want to make anything better.
Now, regular Boobus Americanus who's sitting there in front of their China-made TVs, and we'll talk about that in a second, are sitting there going, sound money, what's he talking about? That's why I love it when libertarians take the debate stage, because they introduce terminology that most people, the brain dead, thoughtless, brain pickled masses, have no idea what's going on. Oh, you mean this dollar in my pocket is a Federal Reserve note of debt? Huh, who'd have thought?
In this country, we have to get back to those principles. I'm the only candidate with an actual plan to do so. I have what's called a Track Back to Prosperity Act. It sets a 10-year run rate legislative agenda, which brings us to a balanced budget via either Article 5 Convention of the States or some other legislative method. But at the end of the day, this is a moral question. How much of the lifestyle that we want to live in this country today do we want to borrow on the backs of children not even yet born? And I don't believe that the two-party system is equipped to handle it. Thank you very much.
So he just brought the big suitcase of morality and plopped it right there on the freaking left versus right paradigm debate stage. I love it. I love it.
Dr. Hathaway, you have 30 seconds.
I'm going to agree with Mr. White when he talks about this being a more.
Oh, a lot of people are going to be agreeing with Mr. White. Now, here's one of the other few things I didn't edit out from Snuffy. I mean, Mrs. Hathaway here.
Moral issue. Our value systems are wrapped into the national debt. Our priorities ought to be placed.
Now, would she have said that if Mr. White had not said that? Was that on her sheet of paper to say, or is she going to bring morality to the forefront because he did it?
On helping those that are the least of these. Our priorities should also be placed upon simple Arkansas families, hard-working Americans, and that is where our focus ought to be.
Back to you, Mr. Hill, for 30 seconds.
Well, look, I have voted for a balanced budget in my time in Congress, but it didn't.
Like the Swedish chef, bork, gonna get a word salad, or just a word salad come in here. We actually said a bunch of things, and when it comes down to it, we said nothing.
Pass the House. It's hard work. You can craft a budget to balance in either a 10-year window or a 20-year window, but as I say, the core effort of that has to be reforming the long-term mandatory spending programs, which the Congress doesn't even vote on an annual basis. Think about that. We don't even vote on 2/3 of the spending that's driving that deficit. So it takes bipartisan effort. I agree with Mr. White on that, and I'm not going to quit fighting to get that.
So he has already established himself in the first 4.5 minutes as the debate leader, because now people are agreeing with Mr. White. We've had the Democrat agree with Mr. White when she probably wouldn't have brought morality to the table. We've got the Republican agreeing with Libertarian Mr. White, because other than, if he didn't say what he said, then he wouldn't have been talking about fiscal responsibility. Of course, Republicans are always, and Democrats, they're always talking about fiscal responsibility. But what do? They're always raising the debt ceiling. We got to borrow more money. And who does that benefit? It doesn't benefit Americans. It benefits foreign policy. It benefits the international banking cartel. It benefits the corporate elite, but it doesn't benefit you and me, because they get to spend those dollars first. And then when they trickle down to us, they're not worth so much. Now eggs aren't $1.50 a dozen. Now we got to pay $3.53 a dozen. See how that works?
That bipartisan consensus.
Well, Mr. White, 30 seconds.
Well, thank you very much. Congressman Hill speaks a big game about fiscal responsibility. He does talk about it. Representative Jim Jordan even called him out over a balanced budget amendment that occurred after $2.2 trillion in basically printed money for a CARES package, a $1.5 trillion omnibus spending bill. It would seem to me that Congressman Hill is indicative of what we have going on in Congress, which is, I believe, wisdom on the matter of fiscal responsibility and how to end inflation has always been chasing him. Somehow he's always been faster. Thank you.
Wisdom has been chasing this Republican, and somehow, I got to hand it to him, he's always been faster. You've always been able to outrun wisdom. Good job, buddy. I love it, man. Talk about the best way to criticize somebody. That is slick.
We have another question now. It'd be from Ms. Munoz, and it goes first to Mr. Hill.
Yes, thank you. You all have very diverse, different backgrounds. Help our viewers get to know you a little bit better and share what makes you qualified, what you believe makes you qualified for this position. Congressman Hill, we go to you first.
Well, thank you, Christina. I've devoted my life to private enterprise. I've been a business person for nearly 4 decades. I've signed the front of paychecks. I've hired people, trained people, accomplished a business mission, been involved in helping other people start their business, pursue their dream of happiness. I've also...
Did you notice the politically correct word? Guys, put the politically correct word that he used in the chat room right now. What was the politically correct word? I'm a business what? I don't want to offend anybody. There might be somebody around here. That's talk about playing politics, man. I'm not a businessman. I'm a business person. Did you catch that?
Yes, thank you. You all have very diverse, different backgrounds.
In government. I was a young staffer on the Senate Banking Committee, where I learned how to make policy, how to get laws written.
Let me play it back here. Let's see. Where does he say business person?
Well, thank you, Christina. I've devoted my life to private enterprise. I've been a business person.
Playing politics there. Playing politics.
For nearly 4 decades, I've signed the front of paychecks. I've hired people, trained people, accomplished a business mission, been involved in helping other people start their business, pursue their dream of happiness.
I've been there on the boards in Congress, signing away the future wealth of unborn generations. I know exactly what I'm doing.
I've also had the pleasure twice before to try to work for a better country in government. I was a young staffer on the Senate Banking Committee, where I learned how to make policy, how to get laws written and enacted into law. And then I had the pleasure of working for President H.W. Bush when he was in the White House, both at the Treasury and in the White House, fighting for solutions for exactly the kind of problems that we face. So, Christine, I think it's my view of being...
Mr. HW, New World Order. I had the pleasure of working with Mr. Thousand Points of Light. We got a new world order materializing on the horizon. I work for that guy right there.
Being a civic leader here in Little Rock, as a chamber chairman, as a Rotary president, active in my church, my business leadership and entrepreneurship, and my past experience in policymaking that make me a good candidate to continue to represent the people of Central Arkansas.
Mr. White, 1 minute.
Thank you very much. I too am a businessman. I owned and operated a very successful company for almost a decade.
He, on the other hand, is a business man.
Employing hundreds of people, dealing with vendors, both domestic and foreign. So I know how to balance budgets. I know how to run teams. I know how to reach across aisles and make compromises. That's just part of my experience. I'm also just an everyday Arkansan, and I believe that representative government ultimately requires people that represent you. I don't necessarily know if many people in Congress today represent the districts that they currently claim to represent. The average income in the Central District, 2nd Arkansas, is around $50,000, but we have people in Congress that are making millions and millions. Do they represent?
No, I love it too. She's got her business suit on, hair coiffed, eyelashes primo. He's got his nice little suit on. This guy comes with a suit jacket and jeans, no tie. Just gotta love it. I gotta love it. Why don't we just do something different? If you keep doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result, what does that make you? Sane or clinically insane?
Present you. Do the problems that occur in your...
It's not just the way this guy dresses, but the platform that he speaks from. When he speaks from his heart, he's speaking from the core of liberty, individual liberties. He knows what's going on in the economy. He knows what's going on with foreign policy. He knows what's going on with education. He knows the Federal Reserve and the IRS are the two biggest domestic terror cells on American soil.
Your daily life, do they affect them? These are questions I think the electorate needs to ask themselves when they go to the poll this
Ray says, I wonder if she's really a businessman too.
November. And with that, I'll yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Hathaway, 1 minute.
I am an educator by love and training. I have been teaching for 16 years. Of those 16, 8 here in Central Arkansas, between Little Rock School District, Pulaski County School District.
I thought I edited more of her out. Okay, let's get back to this right here.
I think that this entire stage comes down to what...
Are you guys okay with that? Are you guys okay with me skipping over Snuffleupagus there? If you're not okay with it, just say no. If you are okay with it, just say yeah, skipper.
We believe our right.
Let me go back to this right here. I thought I cut more of her out than I did. I wanted to kind of keep everything in context. But again, if you want to watch this entire debate, it's an hour and a half. I'll leave the link in the description and the pinned comment when I get done. By the way, this video is brought to you by All Personal Protection Devices Matter. You can get one in the store. Oh, by the way, it's free standard shipping through the 23rd. Today's the 21st, so it's through the 23rd. Free standard shipping in the store. The link's in the description.
I think that this entire stage comes down to what we believe our rights are and where they come from. I personally believe that you were born with your rights, that you were born into this universe with them, that government's only job is to secure them, and that I don't believe a government has to be that large or that complex to do that job. Therefore, liberty is always my North Star. I believe it's the guiding principle of everything government should be, say, and do. And with that, I'll yield my time. I have nothing else to add. Thank you.
One of the issues that is driving this campaign, not only, across the country, but certainly in Central Arkansas and indeed in the capital city, is crime. As we speak, the Little Rock police are investigating, depending on how it's counted, the 68th or 69th homicide of the year. Little Rock seems on target easily to surpass its record number of homicides. In addressing the crime problem, is it primarily a federal responsibility, a local responsibility, or what is the mix? How would you address that?
Ultimately, I believe it's an individual responsibility. However, obviously the federal government and state governments have a role in this. Look, our criminal justice system fails really for 3 primary reasons. One is a vast number of things we consider to be crimes are not. No victim should be no crime. We delegate and use a vast number of limited law enforcement resources investigating things that are not in fact crimes. Another reason that our criminal justice system fails is that our penal system fails. We should focus on reducing recidivism and not just locking people up. I'm all for private industry answering public problems, but I believe that these for-profit prisons should be licensed on a recidivism reduction measure. That would mean that they were more in line with what our goals were, which is reduced future crime, not profiting off increased current crime. And last but not least, our bail system does need to be looked at. Most of our local city and county jails are filled with poor people for, again, things that are not actually crimes. Bail reform is getting some bad reputation in certain cities, but those are the three reasons I believe it needs to be, what's going on with it and how we can fix it.
Now, to me, I mean, there are a couple things that I disagree with in there, but it's not really, I'm not going to interject my ideas. That's not really the scope of this video right here. There may be some things that could be massaged there, in my opinion, and that's just me armchair quarterbacking. But I think for the most part, what he said about the recidivism and make it a recidivism reward base for these corporate entities or these private companies who are, out there basically profiting from prisoners. Yeah, make it recidivism based. In other words, how many of these prisoners don't return to a life of crime when they get out? That's the metric by which these companies who jail these people for profit should be judged, in my opinion. I mean, because, you got to do something with the criminals in society, but make sure they're criminals in the first place is what he's saying. No, if there is no victim, there is no crime, and you can't declare the state as the victim. Oh, the state is the victim. That's why we had to put him away. He transgressed against the government. He was a tax evader. He didn't let us extort his funds, his hardworking, his labor and his time and laboring energies. Yeah, that's not a crime because there was no victim. Nobody was harmed. Nobody was threatened. No property was damaged and people didn't pay for it. Those are true crimes when people are really, really victimized. So make sure, number one, that the people who are in your prisons actually created a victim. In other words, there was somebody harmed in the process. Make sure the judgment is right, and make sure that, keeping people in the loop in the carousel of criminal activity in and out of prisons isn't something that is rewarded. I don't have a problem with that.
I think that if you look at it, statistically speaking, a vast majority of our crime occurs in two places in this country. It's the inner city and it's at our southern border. Both of those have something in common, and that is drug profits from the black market drug trade. I personally believe that if we were to have legal, regulated drug markets, we would solve a lot of these issues. A simple thought experiment.
Now, if a red flag went off when he said this right here,
regulated drug markets, we would solve a lot of these issues.
Government regulated drug markets. I don't like that, but I think I know why he said it. I would have to ask him why he said it so he could tell us his actual reason. But I think why he said it is because you got to be real careful when you're on the tight wire of a debate stage, because you got people totally immersed in the left paradigm. You got people totally immersed in the right paradigm. You're bringing these new ideas to the forefront like, hey, we have a dishonest, unsound money system, and that's what's causing inflation. We got most of the people that are in prison right now are in for victimless crimes. Believe it or not, even though you and I are familiar with all this terminology, there's a lot of people out there who absolutely are not. They're plugged into Fake Stream, CIA infiltrated Operation Mockingbird, MK Ultra Media, and they're just spouting the party line. They're just saying what their party says, or they're saying what CNN says. They're saying what Fox News says. So this guy's coming along trying to, balance this tight wire thing, throwing out, the drug market should be legalized. I think the context in which he said it is, if you at least did that, because he's kind of an incremental kind of guy. It's like, hey, I'd rather make one step advance rather than two steps back. So let's go ahead and take some advancements, and then let's shed off all the tyrannical garbage stuff. But if we start legalizing and then regulating, then at least we introduce competition into the market. And when you introduce competition into the market, then the narco traffickers have competition. It takes competition away from them. That reduces the killings. That reduces all the crime that happens as a result of all this narco trafficking. So that's why I think that he said what he said.
A simple thought experiment. If tomorrow we had a debate on the House floor regarding legal regulated drug markets, do you believe the narco-terrorists at our southern border or inner city gangs would vote for or against such a measure? They would clearly vote against it because it would put them out of business, and isn't that what we want?
Dope.
As to drug legalization, I don't support drug legalization because I think we've seen from the experiment in some states that illegal drugs grow when you have legal drugs in a state like Colorado.
Is that true? Illegal drug habits and drug usage and drug sales and drug purchases. Do illegal drug sales grow when other drugs are made illegal? Because the last I checked, the biggest drug dealers on the planet operate on street corners called CVS, Walgreens, and Rite Aid. And last I checked, those are the main propagators of what we know as the opioid epidemic right now. So, I'm a little confused as to what he's saying there.
Mr. Hill takes the next question first, and it comes from Steve Brawner.
Representative Hill, what are the primary causes of the current inflationary environment, and what should federal policymakers do about it?
Right. Well, thanks, Steve. I think the principal drivers of inflation, and this is the largest, the highest inflation we've had in 40 years, and it's a thief. Inflation is a thief. It takes from those on fixed income. It takes from our hardest working families. And at the source of it, it is a federal responsibility for two principal reasons. First, the Federal Reserve during the pandemic dropped interest rates to zero and began printing money, if you will, $120 billion a month. So we had a very accommodative monetary policy, and then we spent extensive amounts.
Called quantitative easing or money printing or currency printing, or, if we did what they did, they would call it counterfeiting. And why don't they want us counterfeiting? And I don't suggest anybody do that, but why don't they? Why doesn't the average citizen want other people out there counterfeiting? Because when you counterfeit money and you throw that money into the supply of real money, and I'm not saying currency is real money or anything like that, but we do use it as money. But if you printed a bunch of $100 bills, let's say you printed, $1 billion and threw it into your local economy, what would that do to the value of every unit of, piece of money, every dollar out in the economy? It would devalue it. So of course you don't want counterfeiting, because people legitimately work for legitimate, and I'm saying that in quotes, legitimate notes. So if you putting a whole truckload full at one time, the dilution is the solution to crazy pollution. Well, you don't want dilution in the money supply, because dilution in the money supply means all the money that you worked to accumulate and to save automatically becomes devalued. So if you did what the Federal Reserve did, if you did what the Treasury did, you'd be going to jail for a long time. But they can do it because badges and uniforms and fancy plaques on walls and fancy names in front of names grant special rights in their mind.
Of money to fight the pandemic. When President Biden came into office, he was told by Democratic economic advisors like Steve Ratner or Larry Summers, don't double down and keep spending money at this rate or you're going to unleash inflation. So a loose monetary policy at the Federal Reserve, too much spending by the federal government and the fiscal side, in my view, are the principal drivers of inflation. A third issue is the supply chain impact from the pandemic.
Mr. White.
So he's got a point with the Federal Reserve and the Treasury there. Definitely has a point.
Thank you so much. Yes, the number one cause of inflation and the only cause of inflation is deficit spending by Congress. It essentially works like...
I would not say it's the only cause, because there wouldn't be deficit spending by Congress if you didn't have cheap credit, easy money, Federal Reserve counterfeiting. You wouldn't have any of that because there wouldn't be money to spend. If there was actually sound money, if it was gold, silver, precious metals backed, it would be limited in supply and Congress couldn't take from it. So I disagree with him that the number one driver of inflation is Congress, because Congress would be restrained by the Federal Reserve if the Federal Reserve was using sound money. Of course, that's kind of an oxymoron. The Federal Reserve wouldn't be using sound money. Absolutely not. That's why the Federal Reserve is here, so they can make a dishonest, unsound money system, so that they can make truckloads of money and diminish the value of your time and laboring energies, basically treating you as an economic slave.
This Congress spends beyond its means. That creates a deficit. The U.S. Treasury borrows that deficit from a private bank known as the Federal Reserve. And at the behest of Congress, that excess currency is input into the economy, and thus you have more dollars chasing fewer goods, and thus inflation. I do, though, reject the fact that this is somehow a Biden issue or this is someone else's issue. I'll remind everyone at home watching that inflation is not new. It's just now noticeable. We have had deficit spending in this country at least since the turn of the century. And in fact, fact, in the past 21 years in Congress, Republicans had an unopposed government 9 of those 21 years, where they controlled the House, the Senate, and the presidency, all simultaneously with no Democrat opposition, and they still managed a deficit in every single one of those financial years. The answer to this problem is quite simple.
That is a boom point right there. And that's what I love about getting out of the left versus right paradigm lie. Now you can see clearly. Now you can throw terms around if they're truly in your heart and actually disseminate the vital information to keep people being at least less ignorant. Those who desire to be ignorant and free desire what never was and what never shall be. So this guy steps out of the mold. That's what I love about this. He steps outside of that corrupt paradigm from Washington's District of Criminals put together by the Zio International bankers to deceive the masses, and now he's able to slam both the left and the right. I love this.
Simply getting spending under control, balancing the budget, and actually passing a budget for once in our history, at least recent history.
Well, spending is a key issue, but the Federal Reserve policy of buying that debt and keeping interest rates too low for too long has contributed to this environment. We've not had inflation this bad at 8% plus in 40 years.
It is not.
And the way to correct it is to
it's
go back.
Guys, it is way higher than 8%. A 60 count of eggs. We went to the store last night. A 60 count of eggs is $17.68. Last year at this time, it was $6.53, guys. From $6.53 to $17.68 for a 60 count carton of eggs. That is ridiculous. Look at your milk prices, your egg prices, your bread prices, your fruit and vegetable prices, and tell me it's only 8%. Look at I don't know if you guys save receipts, but look at the receipt for the same amount of goods that you bought last year as opposed to this year. I guarantee you it's 40 or 50%. A tray of chicken breasts used to be $1.99 a pound. And I'm talking about chicken breasts. I'm not talking about the chicken parts or thighs. I'm talking about the chicken breasts. $1.99 a pound. Now at my store, it's $3.24 a pound. In New York and California, it's even higher than that. So what is that? $1.99 to $3.24. What's that, like 78 to 83% increase? And you guys are talking about 8% or 8.5% inflation. It's no way. We're paying double what we were paying for gas last year. As a matter of fact, in 2020, not exactly double. In 2020, January of 2020, the average gas price was $2.17. As of a couple weeks ago, it was $3.85. So what is that? That's another 76% increase to 8.3%. That's because CPI is calculated excluding food and fuel. Food and fuel. Let's see. What do I need to actually live? Oh, that's right. I need food. And in order to get the money to accumulate so that I can buy the food, I need fuel. But CPI excludes food and fuel. Pre-1980, I don't think they did that.
To pre-pandemic spending levels, move towards a smaller deficit, not have an open buying of bonds by the Federal Reserve, deregulate the economy, don't raise taxes on the productive sector, and unleash American energy so that we can get back to the production that we had before the pandemic.
Back to Mr. White for 30 seconds.
Yes, the only thing that I'll add regarding this is the Nobel laureate economist Milton Friedman once compared monetary printing to alcoholism. He said that the good effects would come first and then you would have the hangover. And we certainly are seeing that hangover now. So fiscal responsibility, again, monetary accommodative policy that's been too excessive by the Federal Reserve is, of course, part of the problem. But at the end of the day, we have a Congress that can't agree on how to balance a budget and hasn't in quite some time. And until we do, we're not going to fix this issue.
I'll tell you what, if we see in the runoff that it's going to be between the Republican and the Democrat, we already know we have a problem, but this will be crystal clear. Yell it from the mountaintops. This thing, the fix is in. Let's put it that way, because at least it should be against white and French here, not the third person.
What are the current main obstacles to installing or expanding on cleaner renewable energy sources in Arkansas? And do you support creating renewable energy sources within this state? And we first go to Mr. White.
Absolutely. So I think for the listeners at home, I want to remind you of a simple fact. The same people who can't stop robocalls are telling you that if you just give them more money, they're going to make the weather better. And if that sounds like a scam or it sounds like it doesn't make sense, that's because it doesn't. Now, regardless of whether you fall on the climate change belief spectrum, whether you believe that it is man-made and we must do something now, or whether you believe that it is complete hoax, surely we all can get behind efficiency and modernization. And to the question you ask, modernizing the power grid should be an utmost important priority that we have. We have failing power grids in Texas, failing power grids in California.
She's sitting there going, God, this guy's kicking ass, man. Jeez, this guy's got an answer for everything.
And they're going to keep failing across this country. Over the past 14 years, we have had no new increase in power production in this country. Don't take my word for it. Go to energyinformationagency.gov. I personally believe the answer is in nuclear, safe nuclear, such as liquid fluoride thorium reactors, molten salt reactors, much like we built in the 1950s at Oak Ridge National Laboratory.
Hathaway's sitting there going, molten salt reactors? I don't even know what he's talking about. I hope they don't ask me that question.
And I know I'm running out of time, but I would invite the audience to research those technologies. I'd love to see more of them right here in Arkansas. Transitions to new paradigms should ideally be pain-free and consequence-free. They should not be chaotic, abrupt, or forced. So part of this entire discussion that we're having about renewable energy, cleaner energy, let's not forget American oil production. We need to unleash it. We need to increase it back to pre-pandemic levels. We were producing roughly 13 million barrels of oil a day in November of 2019. We have not retaken that trend since then. I think that's a failure of the current administration and a failure of Congress and a failure upon the American people, and they're the ones suffering the consequences of it.
America is making significant, in the billions of dollars, contribution to the defense of Ukraine.
I mean, he's not just mopping the floor. He's whistling now. He's like, he's got the whole school to himself. He's going to mop the entire floor.
And the administration wants to keep that, the State Department and the administration wants to keep that aid flowing to Ukraine, says it is absolutely essential. There is apparently a significant movement in the Congress, in the Republican conference at least. The minority leader says that it's going to be more and more difficult to muster support for that. If you were in Congress, would you vote for continued support, aid, financial aid to Ukraine?
Ooh. I wanted to play her response here. Listen to the question.
Would you vote for continued support, aid, financial aid to Ukraine?
Would you support, let's just lay the question out the way it should be asked. Would you support the further plundering of the American people so that we can give to one of the most corrupt nations in the world? What's your answer, Hathaway? Snuffy.
I hope that we can begin to come back to Central Arkansas issues and not just discuss what is fighting, the infighting that has happened between the Republican and the Democratic administrations in Washington, D.C., and putting us in a position where we have to continue to defend Joe Biden and his record. Point one.
Well, that's a point that you're making that has nothing to do with the question.
Point two. I do not want to see our brothers and sisters from the 489th, Camp Robinson, Camp Pike, the Jacksonville Air Force Base, to have their blood spilled in the streets of Ukraine.
That wasn't part of the question either.
We are up against, as a country, against a tyrant, a dictator who is dangerous.
Who? Schwab? Gil Bates? Who are we referring to here? Oh, it's probably that crazy Putin, man.
And I would rather see us put our treasure into defending and protecting and walking alongside our allies and our partners in the region, as opposed to
I want to put our treasure, I want to put the treasure of the American people into the pockets of our allies so that they can fight against the dangerous dictator. Because that's what I learned on mainstream TV.
Going over to Ukraine, where we may have a loss of life.
Mr. Hill.
Well, I have supported American aid along with the other 50 countries that are supporting Ukraine.
American aid is economic RAPE. Okay, let's just call it what it is. I support the economic terrorism of the American people so we can fund nations that don't even deserve it. So that we can support possible, and I'm not saying it's like this or anything, but some people would actually call it a money laundering scheme.
to defend itself and its sovereign territory against the brutal, illegal invasion by Putin. Nobody's checked Putin for 20 years, starting with President Obama, who let him take over Crimea. He paid no real economic, diplomatic, or financial cost from that. That is what has led to the conditions that we have on the ground. So if we'd done our job on the front end, we might have had...
What's he speaking as? A mouthpiece for who? A puppet for what organization? Oh, you're going to be perfect over there in Congress, Mr. French.
A different outcome here.
Or Mr. Hill, French Hill.
But he invaded, and we should back that, because if you let Putin take Ukraine, he's not going to stop.
You can't let him do it. You can't let that evil, dastardly, red devil villain Putin take Ukraine. You just can't do it. We've got to empower NATO. We got to put more money in the pockets of Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, and Boeing, man. The defense contractors, their kids are practically starving. They're in the street. They're in cardboard shanties on Hollywood Boulevard. We got to do something to help the poor little defenseless defense contractors, man.
In Europe?
Dump pallets of cash. We'll even pay for the pallets.
And you're also sending a message to other authoritarian dictators like the Chinese Communist Party that America's not on the watch with our partners.
You're sending a message to all the dictators in all the other countries that Americans are suckers, man. We're suckers. They'll believe anything. This
is an important issue, and it's important to the American people that they recognize the risk of Putin's invasion.
Mr. White.
Here we go, White. Ramp it up, man.
Arkansas, please listen to me very carefully.
Okay.
The same people who lied to you about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, the same people who took 20 years, went through 4 presidents, trillions of dollars, billions worth of military equipment on the American side, thousands of American lives, to accomplish the insane task of turning Afghanistan over from the Taliban back to the Taliban, are now telling you that you must support a war with Russia. It's the same people, they just have different puppets. One of those puppets, in my opinion, is Congressman Hill. I find it morally repugnant and disgusting that any Congress in this country...
Look at him. Look at his face. He just called me a puppet. Doggone it. I better not. Oh, I did it. I licked my lips just like a good puppet would. Listen to that. Listen to this, man. From the makers of the weapons of mass destruction, the ones who brought you the Gulf of Tonkin lie and Operation Northwoods now bring you the war with Ukraine. We've got to win at all costs. It doesn't matter if you pay $10, $15, $20 a gallon. We got to give it to Zelensky.
Back to the Taliban, are now telling you that you must support a war with Russia. It's the same people, they just have different puppets. One of those puppets, in my opinion, is Congressman Hill. I find it morally repugnant and disgusting that any Congress in this country would be willing to run the nation's credit card for a cash advance, guaranteed by future generations not even yet born, send hundreds of billions of our money, borrowed money, across the ocean, while we have veterans right here in this country coming back from 2 previous unjust wars we are not taking care of. With Michael White as your congressman, I will take care of Americans and our veterans first. That is not selfishness. That is not being an isolationist. That is being a servant, which is exactly what this position is supposed to be.
Oh my God, it's a grand slam. I wish I had one of those buttons where it plays the crowd goes wild. Just called this guy a puppet to his face. We don't need more marionettes dangling from bankster strings. We don't need more defense contractors shoveling more trillions into their pocket. You don't need French Hill up in Congress. Wow. That's like a backhand and a forehand and a judo kick.
Well, it's precisely that we don't want to send American troops into Europe, that we stand up to a thug like Putin and support Europe.
And there you go. Never let a good crisis go to waste. Hey, we have an opportunity to tell the American people, hey, let's keep troops on American soil. Oh yeah, how do we do that? We want to keep troops on American soil. We don't want any more bloodshed. How do we do? Well, it's just going to take $80 billion. And that's just today. I tell you what, just give us a blank check. We'll make sure it goes to the right people. We'll make sure there's no money laundering happening. We'll make sure that there's no criminality taking place and no corrupt fingers in the pie along the way. Just trust us. But if you don't trust us, then we're going to have to send troops. We're going to have to start conscripting soldiers. And you don't want your sons and daughters to die in Ukraine, do you? No, we don't. Okay, then you need to deal with $11.50 a gallon gas. You need to deal with $5 a pound chicken. You need to deal with $10 a gallon milk. It's all for Ukraine, man. Come on, change your social media profile. Put the Ukraine flag.
In backing Ukraine to get him out of that country. December 7th, 1941, 9/11. These are things we can't ignore when the thugs are at work in the world. America's elite.
These are the things we can't ignore when the thugs of mainstream media are at work in the world, trying to inject things into your minds that probably, historically speaking, just ain't the truth. Matter of fact, it's the exact opposite. Remember the Gulf of Tonkin lie when they said that North Vietnamese torpedo boats were firing on the USS Maddox. Remember that? And afterwards, LBJ was recorded from the White House saying, well, for all I know, they were just shooting at whales out there. Well, that one lie, according to history, led us into 59,000 American lives dying, 1.3 to 3 million civilian casualties that they call collateral damage. And that was just from one lie. How many trillions did we spend on the lie of weapons of mass destruction? How many soldiers had to die? How many civilian casualties were laid waste? How much technology was left just rusting in deserts? This guy is second verse, same as the first, man.
Leader in the world. We're backing Europe in their effort to make sure that Putin does not take over the sovereign country of Ukraine.
Congressman, from where I sit, I don't necessarily know if you stand with Arkansas, or if you stand with America, or even if you stand with Ukraine. It seems to me that you stand with Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, and any other large defense contractors who were lucky enough to cozy up with you financially.
Oh my God. And look at this face right there. It's like, who damns people? Who is they? General Dynamics, Raytheon, Boeing, Northrop Grumman. That's I got to listen to this again, man. I'm not sure exactly whose side you're on, Mr. French Hill. I do know that you're a puppet. I do know that you're dangling from the string. I see your mouth talking, but I think something is shoved up your you-know-what and animating your vocal cords.
Congressman, from where I sit, I don't necessarily know if you stand with Arkansas, or if you stand with America, or even if you stand with Ukraine. It seems to me that you stand with Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, and any other large defense contractors who were lucky enough to cozy up with you financially. With that, I will yield my time. Thank you.
Another home run. Another home run. This is what I love about this debate right here.
Mr. White, why do so many people not trust the results of the 2020 elections? And what should be done to restore that trust for this election and then for the following presidential election?
Thank you so much. I think a better question is, why don't people trust the government to begin with? What we're seeing with the election of 2020 is a symptom of a long occurring problem. We have a two-party system more focused on power and control than they are on actually solving problems. And so every 2 to 4 years, we fight this miniature civil war where one side says, if you vote for me, I promise you utopia. And if you vote for the other person, I promise you Armageddon. We will make a better system when we start to remove the unjust powers from government, as opposed to fighting about which side gets to wield them. That will increase trust in the government and the process of the American people. I personally believe the only way that will ever happen is if there's a viable third party in Congress where no one holds control. The Founding Fathers understood the power of three. That's why they gave us a triune government, legislative, judicial, executive. And I believe that same sort of balance should be mirrored in Congress. And if people start voting differently, we'll eventually get there.
Let's talk about higher education. I think most would agree that the rising cost of higher education is making college unattainable for some Arkansans. Should the federal government get involved? And if so, how? Or is it supply and demand and the federal government doesn't need to be involved in the cost of college? Dr. Hathaway, to you first.
My students were extremely happy the day that they found out legislation had been signed.
Yeah, this is why I left this in here. I want you to listen to what she says about the student loan debt forgiveness.
My students were extremely happy the day that they found out legislation had been signed through executive order that their student loans would be forgiven. The fact that this money is going to be applied to our students' accounts directly, especially those that have come from low socioeconomic backgrounds, that's going to give them a leg up once they come out of college, whether it's by graduation or by separation from the institution.
Is it really? Or is it going to teach them to be irresponsible? And anytime you signed a contract, hey, somebody's going to be there to bail you out. Plus, when you do all this, the money in the pockets of the people who actually did save money for their college and did pay off their college tuition, what about those people? Those people are left in the dust. They weren't rewarded. The people who were rewarded are the people who didn't pay it back. And where did all that money come from? Oh, it came from the people who were responsible, and it's going to come down the line from the people who are irresponsible. That's why prices are going up. That's exactly why college tuition is going up, because government has gotten involved and have manipulated the system.
That's going to give them an opportunity to be able to go out and start their own businesses, to purchase a home, a vehicle, to be able to invest in themselves and in their families as well as their communities. That part of the conversation ought to be had, made real and understandable to all people when it comes to the passage of the most recent legislation.
She doesn't even understand what's going on.
Well, unfortunately, there wasn't any legislation regarding student loan forgiveness by President Biden. He unconstitutionally initiated this forgiveness by executive order.
True.
And while I have complete empathy to the families burdened by that $1.3 trillion in student loan debt, the origins of it are a very cynical attempt by President Obama to pay for the Affordable Care Act by preempting all private sector lending and making the federal government earn that interest and earn those fees. So they're in fact a predatory lender. President Biden proposed this forgiveness that is a detriment to the 87% of people that don't have a student loan or worked hard to pay off their own student loans or put themselves through college without a loan. He didn't make a single idea to reform the program.
That's true.
He just said we're going to forgive it. So we're still digging this hole deeper because of the failed student loan program at the federal government. It deserves major reforms.
Truth is truth, no matter who
Mr.
says
White
it.
has 60 seconds.
Thank you so much. This is one of those issues that highlights why government sometimes is the problem and not the solution. There are two areas in our economy where government is more involved than anywhere else. That is education and healthcare. And it is not without coincidence that those two areas consistently have prices rising higher than inflation. For instance, since 1963, the average cost of college tuition has increased 37 times. To give you an idea of what $1,000 was in 1963 compared to today, it's $9,500, which means college tuition has outbeat inflation 4-1. This is because of government interference, not because of a lack of government interference. When we talk about this issue with student loans, my only question is make it make sense. The American people are being told simultaneously, student loans are bad, we must forgive them. But then the next day, we're going to go right back to writing new ones. I say get the government out of student loans, out of the universities, have them find price points that are affordable for their students, and we will see college tuition begin to come down. Thank you very much.
We go to Dr. Hathaway for 30 seconds.
Couple things. One, there is no explicit right in the Constitution for individuals to have the right to vote. That's one. Number two.
By the way, there was no, I don't think there was an edit there.
To come down. Thank you very much.
We go to Dr. Hathaway for 30 seconds.
Yeah, there was no edit.
Couple things. One, there is no explicit right in the Constitution for individuals to have the right to vote. That's one.
We weren't even talking about that. We were talking about college tuition.
Number two, student loans are a crisis. The president did have record this as an executive order, meaning that once he leaves office, this could easily be waxed away. Also, the Republicans are fighting day after day to keep student loans from being removed, to cancel those student loan debts. You all, over $1 trillion is dedicated to student loan debt in this country. We have to do something better.
Because money grows on trees.
To address this matter.
Got a call. We go to Mr. Hill again for 30.
Well, we should do something about it, and Republicans are for reforming the system. We don't think the federal government should be in that business, number one, but if they're in that business, it ought to be limited to books, tuition, room, and board. Right now, it's an open-ended checkbook. There's no underwriting. There's no coaching. Our higher ed institutions are pushing this debt on families that have no recourse about it. How would I reform it? Number one, they ought to have a financial literacy training before they take out a student loan. And number two, the universities should be on the hook for part of it. And finally,
financial literacy training before they take out a student loan. Financial literacy training.
we should let employers pay it off for good employees that they hire.
I will echo some of the things that Congressman Hill said. Again, I do not believe the federal government should be involved in this whatsoever.
Nope,
and if we
shouldn't.
are involved in a very limited capacity. At the end of the day, free markets determine their prices by very efficient price discovery. If people are not guaranteed to be able to borrow for a product, you will see prices come down. Competition is what drives prices down, and free markets do so. It's the same reason that a flat screen TV 20 years ago was $10,000, and now you can get one for $100 and a corn dog at a Black Friday sale at Walmart. The same thing can happen in education. We just need to let it occur. Thank you very much.
The entitlement programs many have.
One of them sitting there going, man, I wish I'd have thought about that corn dog example. Give me a corn dog example. I love that. That's a great idea. But that is what the free market does. The free market increases competition. And because that competition increases, those companies are competing for your dollars, which incentivizes them to make the highest quality products at the best possible prices. So when you have competition, which the government is in the business of eliminating, because we all know that from decades and decades and decades of government intervention, so they increase the quality and reduce price because they're incentivized to do so. They work more efficiently and they work more effectively, and they're not waiting on government grants, because the government grants in a free market will never come. If you're a bad company, you will fail. If you're a bad company, nobody's going to buy your products. If you're a bad company and your prices are too high, they're going to go somewhere else. That right there is the free market.
The entitlement programs, many have said, or as acknowledged, are an enormous part of the federal budget. You have a debt ceiling vote coming up in Congress. One of your colleagues from Arkansas says that default ought to be an option, something on the table in case there cannot be a fiscal agreement in terms of capping entitlement spending. Do you agree with that?
Well, first off, let's just go ahead and predict how this is going to go. We're going to have Republicans and Democrats hemming and hawing on Twitter, social media, any news station they can about fiscal responsibility, ending social programs, the back and forth, the theater of opposition we're going to get every time, and guess what's going to happen? The debt ceiling is going to get raised. And it will keep getting raised, and it will keep getting raised and raised and raised until we have real solutions to this problem. I agree with Congressman Hill that mandatory spending programs should be moved to discretionary spending so that we can talk about them. Unfortunately, with the current paradigm we have in Congress, that's just going to mean more argument. That's all it's going to be, is more things for them to argue about, less solutions. Because I hope the American people are waking up to the fact that the two-party system is more concerned with optics and division than they are actually concerned with real solutions.
Optics, division, no solutions, and theater of opposition. Love it, man. Love it. This guy's hitting on all cylinders. Put a 1 in the room if you like what Michael White is saying. And also, if you haven't done so already, everybody's in here. If you haven't hit the like button and you do like this information, this presentation, don't forget to hit the like button. And when this video gets done rendering, don't forget to share it. I really appreciate it, guys. It helps me overcome the algorithms. Let's get back to this debate.
Well, I would reiterate that I think it should be on budget and that we should have long-term reforms. And I would just say that Congress has come together before. In fact, it was a very similar economy than we have right now. High inflation, high debt, concern over the budget deficit. And that was in 1983, the last time that we had significant reforms to the Social Security program put in place on a bipartisan basis, led by Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan. And I think we can do that again, but the key point is it has to be on a bipartisan basis.
He brings up the reforms of Social Security by Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan in 1983. It wasn't but just a breath later that Congress began robbing those funds to pay for other things. So it seems to me again that this was only further evidence of the fact that this two-party system does not know how to fix problems, and it can't fix problems. And until we have a third party in Congress, we're not going to fix these very difficult situations.
This guy's well educated. He talked about the Ronald Reagan Tip O'Neill thing, and then because French Hill did not mention the year, but he says back in 1983. So this guy is well read. He looks like he knows what he's talking about. He's articulate. He can express what he's talking about. And sometimes it's very difficult to convey the nuggets of economic and libertarian truth. And the people that can express it, well, like Ron Paul, he's really good at, being a champion for liberty. But a lot of people find him very difficult to listen to. It's really a pleasure to listen to somebody who's polished, who's articulate, who's knowledgeable, and at least seems like they're speaking from their heart. And that's how I'm viewing this Michael White guy right now.
What lessons can be learned from COVID that could be applied to the current healthcare system and also to a future pandemic?
Here we go. Because I saw some people in the room saying, hey, why don't we address the you-know-what situation? So here's that situation right now.
The COVID-19 pandemic and 20 and 21 and 22. Let's add that on.
Mods, really be careful what you say in the room about this, because that reflects directly on the content creator. So maybe I'm going to play this, but I'm not going to make many comments about it. And you know why? I'm kind of on a dangling from a spider's web on my other channel. There's one more strike and then it's pretty much all over. So I'm just going to let these candidates talk about what their opinion is on what the lessons we learned from what
all together.
And also, if somebody's clearly a troll in the room, unless they're spamming and nobody can get a word in edgewise, all my moderators pretty much know, hey, I'm not into any kind of censorship. If somebody wants to run their mouth and say bad things, just go ahead and let them. When it gets to spam and people, they're spamming so much and cutting and pasting that nobody can get a word in edgewise, that's when we can put them in time out, in my opinion.
Has been one in which we have never seen before, at least over the last 100 years. People literally lost families, lost family members. It touches upon every fabric of this country. It created a public health crisis. It created an educational crisis. It created a global economic crisis.
And according to Rahm Emanuel, when you have crises like that, you don't want a good crisis to go to waste, because, and he says, what I mean by that is, it gives you an opportunity to do things you couldn't do before. Now we've got the cover. Now we've got the justification. Now we've got the narrative to actually unleash all the things that we really wanted to do. But now it's going to be under the cover of keeping people safe. And that is the alibi of tyrants. The alibi of tyrants is safety. I am going to make you people safe. You want to be safe, don't you? And if you don't want to be safe, then those people get criticized. They get condemned. They get canceled.
And if we do nothing more than just study and research what the social and political ramifications of this thing is and how we can best move forward, to create a team of individuals to really analyze the COVID-19 pandemic, and to have the best healthcare professionals to be able to analyze the global pandemic.
And I mean, really, and when I say analyze, I mean really analyze. I mean, like, look at it. You can really analyze it. There's a lot to hear too, and that analyze. That's what St. Anthony Ferozzi, God bless his soul. Can you get a little blessing with that? Of course, you can get major blessing with that. And of course, there's plenty there to analyze, of course. CNN told you there was. MSLSD told you there was. It's just there.
I think that's one step in the right direction.
Mr. Hill.
Well, the pandemic taught us a lot, and we're much better prepared if we do confront another pandemic. And some things that I think are good takeaways are, one, the concept of telemedicine and telehealth and the use of high-speed broadband for distributed learning and distributed health care. This was a real catalyst there. And you see that with the federal government's partnership with the states to expand broadband.
The federal government's partnership with the states to capitalize on a crisis situation that they don't want to go to waste. Those are the things that nightmares are made of. But what else would a puppet say? I mean, Michael White, pointed out that, hey, it's well-spoken, spoken like a true Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, and General Dynamics puppet. Well-spoken like a big farm guy, with the big, the straw hanging out of his mouth. Like a big farm guy puppet. Are you in good with the father of the VAXXXXX?
Next, I think workforce management. how do we plan as a workforce for a public health crisis? And I think you have a lot of independent thought there from a workplace point of view, how to do that going forward. And finally is supply chain resiliency. We found we were too dependent on China and foreign people for pharmaceutical inputs, for our PPE, our materials around healthcare. It was frightening. And I had a bill in Congress that's passed the House 3 times, still in the Senate, to reshore and refine our planning for our medical supply chain. I think that's essential.
See, basically, he blamed everything that happened, the supply line disruption, economic chaos, all the policies that had to be put in place. He blamed it on what? Did he blame it on anything visible? Or did he blame it on something that's invisible that we just had to take fake stream CIA infiltrated Operation Mockingbird's word for it? That we had to take government's word for it? That the COOF response force, the response team, we had to believe every word that they said. Well, what's coming out in the news right now? What are fake stream media networks having to deal with right now? What is the fallout? Because right now there are certain things being blamed on climate change. I even saw something, climate change, overweight. I even saw good health is being blamed on sudden you-know-what syndrome.
Mr. White.
Thank you so much. The entire COVID pandemic somewhat hits at the heart of libertarian philosophy, which I can basically sum up for the viewers as: we don't hurt people, we don't take their stuff. We should stand on principle when we believe that personality and predictions are going to fail us, which they often do. And I feel
personality and predictions often fail us. What's he talking about there?
Unfortunately, in this matter, most of DC and Congress failed to stand on principle. We ran into fear, and many people were saying our response to COVID was going to be worse than the virus itself, and I think now we are being proven correct. However, I don't believe we should cry over spilled milk. This is about what we can do moving forward. So number one, stand on principle. We don't shut down 500,000 small businesses. We don't ruin the economy behind it. But yes, true, telehealth, stress test of our supply chains, and a dynamic workforce management are things we learned well from the pandemic. But we are seeing now a healthcare worker shortage, and we need to be addressing that very shortly because we will not be prepared for another one should it come. Thank you very much.
Didn't even have to address it directly. But what did he go after? He went after the jugular of tyranny. Here's what we should do. What should be our guiding light? Our guiding light should be individual liberties. If somebody didn't harm anybody, threaten to harm somebody, steal their stuff, then that person is not to be messed with. Don't make mandates telling them they got to close down their business, or they got to do this, or they got to get their kids before they can go to school. Individual liberties. Err on the side of principle. Didn't even have to address it. And that's the tight wire that I'm talking about. It's almost like he's doing it masterfully. Because if you go too far over here, you're gonna eke somebody out. You gotta people need to be so coddled sometimes, and then you need to bring them along. It's like you don't throw a 2-year-old in the 9-foot section. You kind of get them used to the water. Don't freak them out too much. Just kind of, some people you can throw in the deep end. Maybe some of you guys didn't mind getting thrown in the deep end or whatever. That's how my dad did me. Took me out in a boat and just dumped me off. And it's like, hey, you sink or swim, man. And sometimes that's the best thing for you. A lot of people aren't like that, though. A lot of people are so mentally fragile that they don't even know what their own pronouns are sometimes. A lot of times. But maybe not as many times as we think.
There's about to be a more extreme version of the coronavirus that is being kicked around in the news right now.
Got it.
She said a whole 35-second thing, and she ran 5 seconds over her time. But this was the very end of what she said right there. There's something on the horizon that's being kicked around on the news right now, and we're going to have to deal with that now too. Why are we going to have to deal with that? Oh, because they say, you got to believe what they say. They're only here for us. They're only there to dispense truth. They wouldn't lie to us. I mean, they have no history of lying to us, right?
And I also agree with...
And she represents people who are already our leaders. This is the mentality that a lot of people have. I don't care if it's Democrat or Republican. They actually have this mentality. Oh my God, they're sitting on the end of their seat, watching nightly news, hanging on every word, believing everything Lester Holt and Rachel Madcow say.
And I also agree with Mr. White's point. If we knew in February of 2020 what we know today, we would have not shut down the entire economy. We would not have shut down every faith community, every school, every small business. We would be able to learn to live with these kind of viruses and put more responsibility on individuals.
Congressman Hill, unfortunately, we don't get to drive in the rearview mirror. That's why principle matters. If you want a job where you only need to make decisions during easy times, Congressman, you might want to get a new job. So we're going to have challenges constantly, and standing on principles is important. Again, don't hurt people. Don't take their stuff. Don't devalue their currency with excessive monetary printing. Don't shut down their businesses. Don't mask their children. Don't close down their faith centers in their schools. Arkansas, in the Declaration of Independence, you will find these words: that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Therein lies the problem. The powers that govern us are no longer just, and they should no longer have your consent. That means this November, you must be willing to go to the polls and vote not in line with this two-party narrative, but rather in line with your beliefs and common sense, grabbing the reins of liberty and steering this country in a direction that will benefit your children and your grandchildren and those not even yet born. Arkansas, I love you. Arkansas, I believe in you. Arkansas, I know you can do this. My name is Michael White, and I'll be the best congressman you've ever had. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain by giving me your vote in November. God bless America, and God bless Arkansas. What questions you got for me?
All right, now this is that was the debate. Here's after the debate. I spared you the Republican and Democrat responses, but here's the Libertarians' response to the news media's questions that they had for him.
Two-party system today.
Absolutely.
There's no libertarians in Congress, so what's going on there? Where's the disconnect? You're saying people don't like the two-party system, but they keep voting for Republicans and Democrats.
That's a great question. I think a big part of that comes down to, first off, funding an organization from a party system. Libertarian Party is the third largest party in the United States. However, on a comparison basis to the Republican and Democrat Party, as far as donor list, organization, the amount of the machine that can get somebody elected, it's just still so small. And it's going to take some time to get there, but we're going to. I believe we're going to. I personally believe the Libertarian Party's future starts from the ground up, with local offices being occupied first here at a state level. Remember, we're putting 56 candidates on the ballot right now in Arkansas. But that's kind of answers your question. It's a money thing, and it's a time thing, and it's just going to take time and money. So,
is your take on the National Libertarian Party? There's been issues going on there, the Mises Caucus. Where are you on some of that? Do you back the Mises Caucus in the National Libertarian Party?
I think that that any change that is focused on trying to improve messaging and awareness of the Libertarian Party is good. I personally, and this is just a personal opinion, would like to see less infighting at the Libertarian Party on a national level. But anytime you get a group of people together over political ideology, you're going to have infighting. That's going to happen. I would personally like to see more infighting, though, after occupying some more offices in the country. I think that'd be beneficial for the LP. But again, I don't speak for the LP National, and so that's just my opinion.
To follow up on what he just said.
Sure.
Even in Arkansas, you've got Spectrum is Ricky Harrington on one side and Total Anarchy on the other.
Okay.
Do we need to move more in one direction or the other for the Libertarians to become more successful?
I think so. I'm a personal believer in incrementalism. I believe that the Republic took 250 years to get to this point, and it's going to take a long time to unwind some of these bad policies. I personally am a constitutionalist. As you have well put, there's a wide variety of libertarians in the party with their current personal beliefs of how government should look. But yeah, I believe that we are better served if we have constitutionalists and individuals who are slowly wishing to unwind unjust powers from the state, as opposed to perhaps, as you've said it, anarchist or min-anarchist kind of as on the party level. So yeah.
Where would you end up?
Where we end up? I think we'd end up where I am, a constitutionalist, somewhere like that. I think that is a good balance. Again, I think that there is the liberty.
Let me just stop right here. I don't necessarily agree with all this, but there is some diplomacy to be considered when he says that he's an incrementalist. At the same time, I can't escape what Lysander Spooner said. Whether the Constitution be one thing or another, this much is certain. It's either authorized such an unconstitutional, tyrannical government as we have, or it's been powerless to stop it. In either case, the Constitution, is unfit to exist. So I buy onto that too. I don't think Spooner could be accused of being an incrementalist. He was like an all or nothing kind of guy. But I do understand the viewpoint of people that go, hey, we need to, I don't even know if it's accurate to say don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, because what if the baby's a dyed-in-the-wool demon? Then you probably want to get rid of the bathtub, the water, the demon, and then start everything from scratch. But there is an infrastructure that the free market created, and the tyrannical market, the controlled market, the regulated market co-opted and overtook and manipulated and controlled. So I would have to think a little bit more about this incrementalism idea. I understand why the argument's made, because it's almost like saying some progress, at least a little progress, is better than taking just a staunch position of, no, we ain't going to move from this. No. But at the same time, I also understand the people that go, hey, we're taking a staunch decision because this is a decision based on principle. And you don't ever move off principle. If he's saying incrementalism while not moving away from principle, I can buy into that. I am 100% for that. But if the incrementalism that I've seen in the past, if it equates to compromising on principles to meet some objective in the future, those never go well. I mean, think about what a good idea and what good intentions they had when they first, hammered out the Constitution. And I'm talking about the original Constitution. I'm not talking about the 1871 modified Constitution. But what did Daniel Webster say about good intentions? Good intentions will always be pleaded for every assumption of authority. It's hardly too strong to say that the Constitution was made to guard the people against the dangers of good intentions. That's what people don't understand about good intentions. Good intentions can lead you down a really, really bad road really, really quickly. So you got to be on your guard against good intentions. It says, and I think he finished off saying, there are men in all ages who mean to govern well, but they mean to govern. They promise to be good masters, but they mean to be your masters. Somebody could apply this to this libertarian, Michael White, and say, hey, he's trying to be, your master. Maybe I don't want to lay that on him. I understand the argument that's made there. I haven't fully digested it, and maybe this would go south. But when you got something that's at least says with his mouth that he's willing to stand on principle, and then he says the right things, he doesn't say the things that lend themselves to pacifying or compromising with the left or the right, but actually calls things out for where they are. The fact that we need to get down to a sound money system, that's the fact that Congress needs to be reined in and their power restricted and rights restored. I'm on board with that. And if you're on board with that too, put a 1 in the room. And I know there are caveats, because I don't want to just have you put a 1 in the room and then, I'm broad brush speaking for everybody. That's why I can't stand, hey, what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? What accomplishments do we want to achieve? We, the people of the United States. It's like, why are you speaking for me? I don't buy onto that and that and that, but you decided to go ahead and speak for me. You included me in we, the people. Well, I'm not into Congress shall lay and collect taxes, because I believe taxes are theft, and I don't think anybody has the power to legitimately steal from other people. Legitimate plunder. It's like, that's a big oxymoron. But for the most part, I definitely agree with this guy, and that's why I'm playing this, because I think it was just fantastic what he did and how he handled the left versus right paradigm lie, and how he swept the floor and mopped the floor and got out the squeegee even and took care of them, in swift fashion.
Libertarianism and the Libertarian Party seems to me to be the only party that gets painted with kind of a real wide brush as a part of its philosophy.
Yeah, Blue Pill says he's likely the best a broken system can currently produce. Yeah, and I wouldn't say that as a slight to him. Okay, I wouldn't say that at all as a slight to him. And, a lot of people say, man, you're so against leaders. Don't you realize that a lot of people, the vast majority of people, need leaders? I'm not against leadership or leaders. I'm against rulers and rulership. I'm against that guy that says, no, you are going to do this, or I am going to punish you, and I'm going to send my band of enforcers out to make sure that you're punished. A leader doesn't do that. A leader just leads. He leads first of all by example, and his example is based on principle, and principles are those things that you just absolutely will not violate. You don't go beyond it. You can't be paid for it. You're not going to be paid off. You're not going to be bought off. You're not going to be disloyal to the people that you said that you were going to protect and serve or save. You can't do that. Why? Because you're principled, because it's inside of you, because that's who you are. That's your character. You can't, it's like trying to wash off spots from a leopard. It ain't going to happen because that's part of who that leopard is.
Libertarian philosophy and it applied in government, I think, are two completely different things. For me, I view it as keeping liberty as a North Star, making that the focus of any decisions you're making inside the paradigm of the government you're dealing with right now. So again, incremental changes where we're constantly focused on the individual and the individual rights as opposed to constantly growing the state and the nation, basically.
That's good answer.
There was a question about the last pandemic and what should we do for the next one. You talked about how the government shut down businesses, etc. We had more than 1 million people who died from the COVID pandemic. So if we had another pandemic that would...
Okay, so with that being the narrative that all these people became unalive because of that, then where do you go from here? Okay, so you got all these people, you got masses of people actually believing that that's true. How do you craft your words? Because this is, let's face it, this is wordcraft, and we do need to negotiate and navigate through this life using words. So how do you do that without immediately clicking the switch off to everybody by saying, well, that's what they say, but here's the real. Have you ever heard of Carrie Mullis? Did you really know what the P.C.R test was all about? Instead of going through that long, that could be a conversation for later, an in-depth conversation for later. But when you're here in front of reporters, how do you handle it? It's the wise man that realizes, hey, I can only give so much truth until it starts being rejected, and then it becomes kind of counterproductive. So how is he going to navigate through this when people already have a preconceived notion that masses of people became unalive because of what? Where do you go from there? Let's see what he does.
It's even worse than that. What is your position? What should be the federal government's role? Shouldn't it be to help save lives?
Well, so the Constitution declares that the federal government has an obligation to the general welfare of the country. And unfortunately, sometimes that gets misinterpreted as the specific welfare of a small group of people. Again, hindsight being 20/20, but I believe that the principles of libertarianism and the principles of individual liberty dictate, again, you don't hurt people, you don't take their stuff. We had 1 million people die because of really bad policy. You had from almost the onset of the pandemic, bad messaging. We were immediately lied to by public health officials, and they continued to. There was continuing evolution of goalposts. There was always mixed messaging. I feel like what the government should have done is educate people and, again, focused more on personal accountability. We know that.
Look where he didn't have to go. He actually turned this whole thing around on, but you're telling me that 1 million people became unalive because of what? And then he turned it around and suggested, well, maybe it's because of this. Maybe it was because of bad policy. Maybe because of the response. Listen to what he goes on further to say, guys. I think that was very prudent the way he handled this. Because, it's like that. It's how do you get a fly off the forehead of your friend thing? Do you use a hammer or do you just whisk it away with your hand? Both of them will achieve the final goal of removing the fly, but one of them will leave a lasting impression. You don't want to use a hammer to remove a fly from the forehead of your friend. So while some people go, no, if you use the hammer, that'll definitely work. Yes, it will work, but it might not work in the way you wanted it to if you're that ignorant, if you're that stupid. So that this is an interesting response to this kind of question, because it's almost like it's a gotcha question. It's almost like, if you answer it in the absolute affirmative, you're damned. If you answer it in the absolute negative, you're damned.
The majority of COVID deaths had a median age of 82 with 4 comorbidities. I never once saw from a federal level messaging on eating better, exercise, reducing your blood pressure, trying to lose a couple pounds. No focusing was on that whatsoever. It was on lockdown, zero COVID policy, and restricting the ones of us that were least vulnerable to the virus to benefit those that may have been most vulnerable. But then still, a number of states, you had essentially retirement villages turned into what were, for lack of a better word, death camps, like, for instance, Cuomo in New York and other places. So I don't view any of the pandemic response as very successful at all. And I think that long term, you'll see that the damage done by government response to COVID will be ultimately worse than the virus ever was. People often want to compare and contrast public health and the economy. The economy is life and death. When people can't make a decision or aren't able to afford both their prescriptions and their heat bill, do you think that over a macroscopic range that doesn't affect mortality of individuals? When people can't afford or have access to preventative care or cancer treatments because hospital systems have been locked down, do we think that doesn't have an overall reaching effect on mortality of populations? So again, to answer your question, I don't think the federal government handled it well. If we have one of these happen again, God help us, we should handle it differently.
Wow, that was intellectual judo, because rather than face it head on the way that people would assume that he would face it, he came through the back door and put it back on them, put it back on the policies, put it back on the regulations, put it back on the tyrannical regulators. Maybe we should consider, maybe when you ask your question, you should have framed it this way, and maybe you should consider it from this angle. If you guys like the way he answered that question, I do. If you guys like that way he answered that question, put a 1 in the room. If you absolutely didn't like the way he answered the question, put a 2 in the room. We can have a conversation about it.
On entitlements,
Sure.
You and French Hill agreed that it should be discretionary spending, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, that should be reviewed by the federal government every year or every 5 years, etc. There's a lot of Arkansans who are dependent on that stuff, people who paid a lot into their Social Security
Yes.
and Medicare. There's a lot of people who are dependent on Medicaid. The state expanded that 10 years ago under Obamacare. So, what is your position? You mentioned incrementalism. There's a lot of people who just want to cut those programs. Are you one of them?
No, not at all. I am much more focused on ending corporate welfare than I am right now on ending individual welfare. There are people that rely on these programs that need them for their lives and livelihoods. They paid into them. They should be getting it. They should be getting their benefits out. The problem is that only government can take $1 trillion program and somehow create no returns and turn it into a Ponzi scheme only Bernie Madoff can be envious of. And it is a Ponzi scheme. If it was a private investment vehicle, Social Security would
You got to admit, that was good.
already been shut down in receivership and bankruptcy, and the people who formed it would be under the federal prison. So
NASA Live says he's already bought and paid for. Where's the proof for that? I can't. I'm not on board with that.
the way that we have to fix it is two parts, in my opinion. One is the people who rely on it, how do we guarantee that they continue to get their benefits paid out? And the two is young people like myself and you who are paying in, how do we unwind our participation?
I think the powers that shouldn't be want us to be that pessimistic, Gangsta Gummy Bear. This guy will. I have a sphere where I can look into the future. This guy will flip flop on everything that sounds good he's selling right now, should he get elected. I think we've become so skeptical and cynical and just like there's no humanity anymore. I think people want us to get to that point. And I get it too, like, because we all have to navigate the tightrope of between hopium and reality. It's like, I hope this guy is who he says he is. I hope he does what he says he's going to do. And then if he does what he says he's going to do, then he's going to be like Dr. No, Ron Paul. And, after 30 years in Congress, and be like, what did you accomplish? Absolutely nothing, because you said no on everything. Yeah, but why did I say no on everything? I said no on everything because I was looking at things through the filter and the glasses of how is this going to negatively impact individual liberties? Is this going to take even 1 red cent out of the pockets of my constituency? If the answer is yes, then I'm voting no. And that is doing something. So I get being that cynical. I am too sometimes, a lot of times, but so I get what you're saying, Gangsta Gummy Bear, and you may be right, but I have hopium that you're wrong. I don't know, man. I don't know. Let's cut to the BS. He wants to be a ruler. Yeah, that's also on the table too. That's also on the table. I guess what's the answer to keep the WEF and the fourth industrial revolution and you'll own nothing and be happy, eat the bugs? What is it that's going to keep that from materializing? Because they're working night and day. You know, they're tinkering with AI and self-driving vehicles and scan your hand, and it's coming, and CBDC, central bank digital currencies, and eliminating fiat and taking away 100% of our freedoms. What's the answer? How do we stop that? Because it doesn't look like very many people are listening. I mean, look, we're talking about probably one of the most important things on the planet. And there's only 416 people in here talking about it, or even interested in listening to it. So I get you, NASA lies. Ain't no hate coming from me to you. I get it. Let's cut through the BS to the point. Get to the point. He wants to be a ruler. I would like to interview him and say, hey, you know what? Let's just get down to brass tacks. Let's talk openly and candidly, and not beat around the bush. You want to be a congressman? You're going to be paid $174,000 a year if you're a based congressman. That you're going to basically be a political welfare recipient, and you want to be a lawmaker. You want to be in on writing the laws, or do you want to go in there and say, hey, that $174,000 check you were going to cut me, take it, send it back to the American people. I don't want it. And are you going to say, hey, the reason I'm here as a buffer to hold back evil from evil that's coming, to expose all of the people that are, the 534 other people in here who are bankster bought. What do you do?
In it in a way that we know, because we know we're not going to get our money out of it, right? So, no, I don't want to end it immediately, but it's going to take some significant work and some look at it. Part of my platform is
I love you, NASA Lies. As a matter of fact, I appreciate when people say that kind of stuff. It's like, come on, man, because there's everything in me wants to just go, come on, let's just go along to get along, man. Let's just stop the tyranny. Let's just cut out this nonsense. Let's get rid of the Federal Reserve, get rid of the IRS. And then the logical side of me goes, it's like, okay, this tumor is growing. Ethel has a 2-pound tumor, a 5-pound tumor growing right next to her liver and her spleen. We can go in there and just grab it and just rip it out, which is going to rip out the liver and the spleen and everything too. Or we can go in there with surgical precision with these little microscopic glasses and spend hours and hours trying to get that thing out of there without there being any negative repercussions. But the fact is, a surgery needs to be performed. Surgeries are generally really not that good for people and should only be used as a last resort. And I'm just using this metaphorically, as we got this huge cancerous tumor growing and have since 1913 called the fiat currency Ponzi scheme that's backed by the petrodollar and the power and might of the U.S. military. That's the only reason it even has perceived value. And that's not going to last very long, because Russia and China are talking about making their own currency, completely detaching and dumping all fiat currency notes. And if you want to see hyperinflation, wait till that day comes. I mean, they're working on that too. So, God, there's so many things. There's so many. This is what I hate about evil. It's so tangled up in our daily lives and so much more in control than we can possibly imagine. Sometimes that quick fix could be deadly. These abrupt things that happen. It's like let's say over the last 20, 25 years, you've gained an extra 100 pounds. You ain't going to lose it overnight. And the answer is not to go on a starvation diet, because then you're really going to mess up your metabolism. The answer is incrementally. You don't even want to stop with the junk food and all that stuff. You want to kind of back off on that. If you immediately, there are some withdrawal realities and symptoms that happen with detaching yourself from too much caffeine, too many Cokes. People get massive headaches. They get sick for days. It's like, hey, maybe we should taper this off and then replace that with some good, clean water. And then a month down the road, we'll taper some more off, and then we'll taper some more off. And then eventually and then let's incorporate a little exercise. You don't want to go out there as a 100-pound overweight individual and do this full marathon or a half marathon, you want to just kind of maybe start walking on the treadmill real slow. And then eventually you can pick up the pace and eventually leave the treadmill behind. And then you're on the road and then you're hitting the weights and stuff. That's how you do it. So I think we can correlate a lot of things metaphorically from the physical into the economic and the things that we have to deal with right now. Because, hey, let's face it, the economy is life. Your livelihood and you making money enables you to actually earn the money to buy the food so that you can eat, so that you can live. Earning money is life. Unfortunately, that's how it works. Even if you lived off the grid, and I don't know anybody who's off the grid. Oh, you're telling me that nothing you wear was derived from petroleum? Then you're not off the grid. All your clothes came from, the plants that you grew or from the trees in the forest or whatever. Then you're not off the grid. Oh, you still got a cell phone. How are you charging that thing? Well, you're not off the grid. Oh, it's completely solar. Well, how are you riding around in your car? Well, I ferment apples. Somewhere along the line, you're using something from the outside. And if you're using anything from the outside, you're not really technically off the grid. If you know anybody, put a 1 in the room. If you know anybody, and I mean 100% is off the grid, 100%. The only way I think you could possibly be off the grid is if you were on, literally, you got shipwrecked like in Gilligan's Island, and you're the only person on the island or a couple of people on the island or whatever, and you're completely detached from society. You've got nothing but the wood spear you just made from that bamboo shoot. And, just, I hear people saying all the time, Brian is using a metaphor for incrementalism, just as Mr. White proposed. This means we will not see justice within our lifetimes, even if such a remote hope comes to fruition. Yeah, that would be, I'm 96% off the grid. SCDHL. Really? I want to see that. It is the 4%, the computer you're using to type that message. Nobody who's typing on my screen right now is off the grid. I highly recommend watching Esoteric Agenda and Chimatica. I forgot what I was saying with the off the grid thing. Oh, wait, let's finish this. There's only a couple seconds left. Let's see. There's a little over a minute left.
Efficiency experts applied to both Medicare and Social Security. I believe we can find ways, just in the way we're spending money now, to make them more efficient. For instance, Medicare, half of the Medicare budget is administrative cost. Medicare is $1.5 trillion program. That means $750 billion of it is administrative fees. Let's say that we can improve that efficiency by 40%. You're looking at roughly $300 billion that we could trim out of the Medicare budget right there. That's incrementalism. That's making something better a little bit at a time without drastically changing it or cutting people off from benefits that they need to live.
What's your business?
What's my business? Liberty is my business. Yeah. I did. So I owned and operated Verizon Wireless stores for about a decade throughout Louisiana and Texas. We sold that company in 2016. Then I started a small firm called White Martin Capital Strategies, which focused on AI solutions for small financial firms. But now, really, I raise my children. I'm a realtor here in Little Rock, living a much more quiet life and focused on things like this, civil matters around liberty and libertarianism.
All right. That was the entire thing. But I wanted to show you that because I thought it was pretty instructive. Shamil says, I'm 100% on the grid and getting ready to merge. I think you're talking about merging your biological structure with technology like Klaus Reset, You'll Own Nothing, Eats the Bug, Schwab says. Pretty funny, back Shamil. 20. Oh, yeah, somebody put in there something about Trump signing 6.2. Oh, yeah. Yeah, People News today says Trump signed 6.2 trillion to give us 385 billion. What a great deal. I know. Trump is not your friend. One of the things that I put up on my Twitter feed today had to do with Trump. Let's see if I can find it. Let's see. Where is it? Oh, yeah, it was this meme right here. I don't know if you guys can see that. He called himself the father of the, the father of the VA double XXXXX. The VAXX is one of the greatest achievements of mankind. Donald Trump said that on December 21st, 2021. Is that something that a friend would say to you? Is that something that a patriot would say to you? Is that what somebody would say if they were in your corner fighting for you and fighting for your liberties? Or is that something that somebody would say if they're fighting for the big farm guy industrial complex? Guys, I did not really intend for this to go an hour and 38 freaking minutes. If you like this video, please give it a like. Don't forget it was brought to you by All Guns Matter. If you buy something from the store, and let me just go to the store right now real quick. If you buy something from the store, you will get free shipping, free standard shipping. And there are a couple new designs in the store that I haven't really talked about much, and some of them that I haven't even talked about at all. But let's see. So I identify as non-binary is one of them. Canceltown thin skins and Canceltown white skins as opposed to the Washington Redskins. And I think it's really funny. A federal government that has Tomahawk missiles and Apache and Lakota helicopters is going to be offended about Washington Redskins. They are the ones who created Operation Geronimo, the one that supposedly got Osama bin who. And they're going to be offended because, and they're going to get in on the cancel culture of, hey, we need to get away from Washington Redskins. That's a little crazy. That's a little crazy here. We don't need to be doing that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's free shipping. You can put any one of these. You got, I'm 1776% sure that nobody will be taking my guns, pro-life, the radical idea that babies are people that we need to protect. This one right here isn't available anymore because it's been rejected because of a copyright claim. You know whose laptop matters. So there's tons. There's like over 100 designs you can put on any shirt, hoodie, mug, whatever you want. And it's free shipping now through the 23rd, October 23rd. So guys, I appreciate it. If you haven't done so already, give this video a like, share it with everybody you know. I'll try to remember to put the entire debate in the pinned comment and in the description. I will see you guys in the next heavily censored shadow ban live stream. And remember, the price of freedom is now and will always be eternal vigilance. And indifference to this notion is the means by which the people have and will secure their own oppression. I'll see you guys in the next live stream. Thank you for joining. Take care.